Have you ever noticed that the most brilliant minds in history shared one terrifying trait? They weren't afraid to be alone. Not just physically alone, but intellectually alone, cut off from the comforting hum of collective thought, standing naked before the universe with nothing but their own consciousness as company. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this better than anyone. While others sought the warmth of the crowd, he chose the cold clarity of solitude. And what he discovered there was so unsettling, so revolutionary, that society has spent centuries trying to convince us he was wrong. But here's the uncomfortable truth: he wasn't wrong. The most intelligent people don't just tolerate solitude, they crave it. They need it. And that need makes them terrifying to a world built on the assumption that humans are fundamentally social creatures who break down without constant connection. You've felt this, haven't you? That moment at a party when you realize you're having a more interesting conversation with yourself than with anyone around you. That relief when plans get canceled and you can finally think your own thoughts without interruption. That strange satisfaction of an evening spent with books instead of people when suddenly the silence feels more alive than any conversation you've had all week. Society tells you this is antisocial. Mental health experts whisper about isolation and depression. Your friends express concern about your hermit tendencies. But Schopenhauer whispers something different. This is evolution. This is your mind recognizing its own superiority to the noise around it. The truly intelligent don't retreat into solitude, they advance into it. They discover what lesser minds never understand, that the most profound conversations happen when no one else is in the room. That the most brilliant insights emerge when social expectations can't interfere with pure thought. That real intelligence isn't about impressing others, it's about impressing yourself with discoveries others could never make. This realization is simultaneously liberating and isolating. Liberating because it frees you from the exhausting performance of social adequacy. Isolating because it sets you apart from a species that mistakes collective thinking for wisdom, popularity for truth, and noise for meaning. Let me show you something most people never see. Right now, as you process these words, your brain is performing an impossible miracle. It's taking abstract symbols and transforming them into meaning, into emotion, into new neural pathways that will exist long after this moment ends. This miracle isn't happening through social interaction or group consensus. It's happening in the cathedral of your individual consciousness. Schopenhauer called this the art of being alone. But it's not really art, it's archaeology. When you strip away the constant noise of other people's expectations, opinions, and emotional demands, what remains? The terrifying answer: everything that actually matters. Think about every breakthrough moment in your life. The sudden understanding that changed your perspective. The creative insight that solved an impossible problem. The moment of clarity that revealed truth behind confusion. Where were you? I guarantee you were alone. Not because other people can't contribute to our growth, but because genuine insight requires the kind of uncompromising focus that social situations make impossible. The crowd thinks in averages, compromises, and comfortable consensus. The solitary mind thinks in possibilities, extremes, and uncomfortable truths. When Einstein imagined riding alongside a beam of light, he wasn't sitting in a committee meeting. When Newton watched that apple fall, he wasn't distracted by small talk. When Schopenhauer developed his revolutionary understanding of human nature, he was walking alone through Frankfurt's quiet streets, his mind free to follow thoughts wherever they led. Most people fear their own thoughts. They need Netflix, social media, constant chatter, background music, anything to drown out the voice inside their heads. But that voice, that internal dialogue you're having right now, as you process these ideas, that's not noise to be suppressed. That's the most sophisticated information processing system ever created, and it works best in the profound silence of genuine solitude. Here's what Schopenhauer discovered that most people never will. Intelligent people don't choose solitude because they hate humanity. They choose it because they love ideas more than small talk, truth more than comfort depth, more than popularity. And once you taste that depth, surface-level interaction becomes almost unbearable, like trying to satisfy your thirst with cotton candy. The intelligent mind in solitude becomes a laboratory where thoughts can collide, combine, and create, without the constant interference of social expectations. Every book you read alone teaches you something no conversation ever could. Every quiet hour reveals connections that groupthink obscures. Every moment of genuine solitude is an investment in your intellectual independence. But this independence comes with a price that society makes sure you pay: judgment, concern, and the constant pressure to rejoin the herd. Here's where things get dangerous to the social order that depends on keeping everyone dependent, connected, and controllable. Schopenhauer observed something that threatens the foundation of how society operates. Intelligence and social need are inversely related. The smarter you are, the less you need other people for mental stimulation, validation, or entertainment. This isn't arrogance, it's efficiency. Your brain is constantly seeking optimal input-output ratios. When you can generate better ideas alone than you can access in most social situations, when your inner dialogue is more stimulating than external conversation, when your thoughts are more interesting than other people's opinions, solitude becomes not just preferable, but necessary for intellectual survival. But society has weaponized this natural preference against you. They've convinced you that needing people is healthy and preferring solitude is pathological. They've created an entire mythology around social skills and emotional intelligence that makes you feel defective for preferring the company of your own mind. They've made you ashamed of your most powerful evolutionary advantage, the ability to think independently without consensus approval or external validation. Watch what happens in groups, even groups of intelligent people. Thoughts get moderated, insights get softened, uncomfortable truths get avoided to maintain harmony. The brilliant observation that might offend gets swallowed. The radical idea that might disturb gets diluted. Everyone becomes a little less themselves, a little less honest, a little less intelligent to keep the social machinery running smoothly. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." In company, we become actors performing the role of who others need us to be. We edit our thoughts in real time, suppress our authentic reactions, and present carefully curated versions of our personalities designed for social consumption. In solitude, we become scientists, exploring who we actually are, what we actually think, what we actually believe, when no one else's opinion can interfere with pure self-discovery. This is why solitary genius threatens the social order. When someone demonstrates that they can be genuinely complete without the group's approval, it exposes everyone else's psychological dependency. When someone finds fulfillment in their own mind rather than external validation, it reveals how empty most social interaction really is. Just elaborate systems of mutual reassurance, disguised as meaningful connection. The intelligent loner becomes a mirror reflecting back society's deepest fear that maybe we don't actually need each other as much as we pretend. Maybe human connection has become a crutch for minds too weak to stand alone. Maybe the emperor of social necessity has no clothes. Consider history's greatest minds. Newton spent years in solitary contemplation, emerging with insights that revolutionized human understanding. Einstein took long, solitary walks, where his mind could wander freely through thought experiments impossible in company. Schopenhauer himself lived mostly alone, finding in that solitude the clarity to see through humanity's comfortable illusions to the raw truth beneath. These weren't people escaping life, but they were people who had discovered that real life happens inside consciousness, not between personalities. They understood that the most important conversations are the ones you have with yourself, if the most valuable insights are the ones that emerge from your own thinking, and the most profound truths are the ones you discover in the silence between thoughts. But here's the terrifying part that changes everything once you understand it. Once you've truly experienced the richness of your own undisturbed mind, most social interaction feels like pollution. Once you've tasted the freedom of thinking without social constraints, the crowd's constant demand for conformity becomes suffocating. Once you've discovered the inexhaustible entertainment value of your own thoughts, other people's conversation often seems banal, predictable, and intellectually impoverished. This realization isolates you in ways that go beyond physical solitude. It creates a psychological distance that others sense but rarely understand. They know something is different about you, but they can't identify what. They feel judged by your contentment, threatened by your independence, confused by your lack of need for their validation or participation in their social rituals. So how do you live with this knowledge? How do you function authentically in a world designed by and for people who think fundamentally differently than you do? How do you honor your intellectual nature without becoming completely alienated from human society? First, understand that your preference for solitude isn't a character defect to be fixed. It's an intellectual superpower to be cultivated and protected. Every moment you spend in genuine solitude is an investment in your mental independence, your creative capacity, and your ability to think original thoughts in a world drowning in recycled ideas. Every book you read alone teaches you something no conversation ever could. Every quiet hour spent in contemplation strengthens your capacity for sustained attention in an age of constant distraction. Every thought you think in silence belongs completely to you, unmarked by the compromises and modifications that social thinking requires. Second, recognize that the world's attempts to shame you out of solitude aren't motivated by genuine concern for your well-being. They're motivated by the crowd's need for validation, by society's requirement that everyone participate in the collective delusion that external connection is more valuable than internal development. When you demonstrate that genuine happiness and fulfillment are possible without constant social participation, you threaten the entire economic and social structure that depends on keeping people insecure, externally focused, and perpetually seeking satisfaction through consumption and connection. Third, learn to protect your mental energy like the precious and finite resource it is. Social interaction. Even positive, enjoyable interaction requires significant energy expenditure. Every conversation demands emotional labor. Every group dynamic requires social navigation. Every interpersonal exchange involves complex calculations about appropriate responses, acceptable opinions, and safe topics. The intelligent person learns to spend this energy intentionally and strategically, rather than scattering it across endless social obligations that provide little intellectual nourishment in return. This doesn't mean becoming a complete hermit or rejecting all human contact. It means becoming radically selective about how, when, and with whom you engage socially. Quality over quantity, depth over breadth, meaningful connection over social networking, substance over performance. The truly intelligent person develops what Schopenhauer called philosophical vision, the ability to see patterns others miss, to recognize the unconscious motivations driving human behavior, to understand the vast difference between what people say and what they actually mean. This vision makes superficial socializing almost impossible because you can see too much. You see the insecurity behind someone's boasting, the fear behind their anger, the emptiness behind their constant need for attention and validation. Small talk becomes an exercise in compassionate anthropology rather than genuine engagement. But this same vision allows you to recognize the rare individuals capable of the kind of deep, honest interaction that actually enhances rather than depletes your mental energy. These people exist, but they're not found in the usual social hunting grounds. They're in libraries, not nightclubs, in bookstores, not bars, in quiet cafes with worn paperbacks, not loud restaurants with craft cocktails and networking opportunities. When you do find these exceptional individuals, fellow travelers in the landscape of ideas, the connection can be profound because it's based on intellectual compatibility rather than social convenience. These relationships aren't about filling time or avoiding loneliness. They're about sharing the excitement of discovery, the pleasure of understanding the joy of finding someone who thinks as deeply as you do about subjects that matter. Learn to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful awareness of disconnection and the aching need for contact and validation that most people experience when they're alone with their thoughts. Solitude is the rich, self-sustaining contentment that comes from having developed a genuinely interesting inner life. Loneliness seeks external cure through social contact. Solitude seeks nothing, it is already complete. The path from loneliness to solitude is the path from dependence to freedom, from external validation to internal authority, from social performance to authentic being. It's not an easy path because it requires you to question everything you've been taught about human nature, social necessity, and the source of genuine happiness. Here's what Schopenhauer knew: that most people never learn the secret that makes truly intelligent people simultaneously free and terrifying. The person who can be genuinely happy alone is the most dangerous person to every system of social control ever devised. You can't be controlled through social pressure if you don't need social approval. You can't be manipulated through fear of isolation if you've discovered that solitude is a sanctuary, not a punishment. You can't be broken by rejection if you've learned that your own mind is better company than most people's friendship. You can't be bought with promises of belonging if you've already found completeness within yourself. This psychological independence is what society fears most. Not your antisocial tendencies, you're not antisocial. Not your misanthropy, you don't hate humanity. Not your arrogance, you're probably more humble than most because you've seen how much you don't know. What they fear is your self-sufficiency, your contentment with your own resources, your demonstrated proof that human beings can thrive without constant external input, validation, and connection. Every advertising campaign, every social media platform, every cultural narrative about success and happiness depends on maintaining your dissatisfaction with solitude. The entire economy of attention requires keeping you hungry for external stimulation, validation, and connection. When you discover that you already contain everything you need for intellectual fulfillment, creative expression, and psychological satisfaction, you become immune to the psychological manipulation that keeps others perpetually consuming, scrolling, buying, and seeking. Your solitude is not a retreat from the world. It's a laboratory for understanding it more clearly than those caught up in its daily drama ever could. Every quiet hour is an opportunity to develop insights the crowd will never reach because they're too busy talking to think, too busy performing to observe, too busy seeking approval to discover truth. The most terrifying thing about truly intelligent people isn't that they reject society, it's that they don't need it. They've found something infinitely more interesting than social validation, the inexhaustible universe of their own consciousness, where every question leads to 10 more fascinating questions, where every book suggests 5 more books, where every insight reveals new territories of possibility that no amount of social interaction could ever provide. In your solitude, you become both student and teacher of yourself. You learn your own patterns, discover your own preferences, develop your own philosophy, create your own meaning. You become the author of your own thoughts rather than a passive recipient of other people's ideas. You develop what Schopenhauer called the art of contentment, the ability to find satisfaction in your own resources rather than constantly seeking it from external sources. This doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you socially independent. You can engage with others from a position of strength rather than need, offering genuine value, rather than seeking validation, participating by choice rather than compulsion. Your interactions become gifts you choose to give rather than services you desperately need to receive. If you've ever felt like an alien at social gatherings, if you've ever found more wisdom in silence than in conversation, if you've ever preferred your own company to almost anyone else's, if you've ever been called too intense or too deep or too much, you're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not missing some essential human component. You're evolved. You've discovered what Schopenhauer spent his entire life trying to teach, that the greatest intelligence is the intelligence that can stand alone, think alone, and find in that aloneness not emptiness, but infinite fullness. The truly intelligent person understands that solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the presence of the most important connection of all the connection. To your own authentic self, your own thoughts, your own capacity for wonder and discovery. In a world that constantly tells you that you need others to be complete, you've discovered the revolutionary truth that completion comes from within. This is why your intelligence is terrifying. Not because you're dangerous to others, but because you're dangerous to every lie society tells about human nature, every myth about social necessity, every story about what people need to be happy. You are living proof that the emperor has no clothes, that the social contract is optional, that human beings are capable of far more independence and self-sufficiency than the crowd wants to believe. Your solitude is not a problem to be solved. It's a gift to be treasured, a strength to be celebrated, a capacity to be developed. You are not missing out on life by choosing silence over noise, depth over surface, quality over quantity. You are accessing life at a level most people never reach because they're too busy being social to ever be genuinely introspective. The path you've chosen is not easy. It requires courage to stand apart from the crowd, wisdom to trust your own judgment over popular opinion, and strength to remain true to your nature in a world that constantly pressures you to conform. But it is the path of authentic intelligence, genuine freedom, and real self-knowledge. Welcome to the ranks of the beautifully, terrifyingly alone. You are not retreating from life, you are advancing into its deepest mysteries. You are not avoiding humanity, you are understanding it from a perspective that intimate involvement makes impossible. You are not running away from connection, you are connecting with the most profound source of insight, creativity, and wisdom available to human consciousness yourself. This is where real thinking begins. This is where genuine discovery happens. This is where true intelligence reveals its most terrifying and beautiful truth. That the mind that can stand alone is the mind that can see clearly, think freely, and live authentically in ways that the crowd-dependent can never achieve. Your solitude is your sanctuary, your laboratory, your temple, and your home. Guard it well, for it contains everything you need to understand not just yourself, but the world around you. With a clarity that would be impossible if you remained forever lost in the comfortable noise of constant companionship. The intelligent choose solitude not because they fear the world, but because they have found something better than what the world typically offers. And that discovery, that terrifying independence of mind and spirit, is perhaps the most revolutionary act possible in a society built on the assumption that everyone needs everyone else to survive and thrive. You don't. And that makes all the difference. And if you felt seen by these words, if something deep inside you whispered, "Finally someone understands," then you belong here. Tell me in the comments, what's the moment you realized your solitude wasn't broken, but brilliant? When did you stop apologizing for preferring books to parties, silence to small talk, your own mind to the crowd's noise? Your story might save someone else from years of thinking they're wrong for being right. Subscribe if you're ready to explore more dangerous truths about consciousness, intelligence, and what it really means to be human. We're gathering the minds brave enough to think alone. The revolution of independent thought starts with you.